you know a lot about it, but I think you'll see some things maybe you haven't seen before in the Constitution. So let me set it up first by giving a 30,000-foot overview, and then I'll get down to some details that I think you may find useful. Now, in looking at the Constitution that we've got, it's interesting that we are one of 195 nations in the world today. All of them have some type of governing document, some type of government that they have, but the difference is what we've been able to produce versus what they've been able to produce. For example, our Constitution went into effect in 1789. All right, so in that period of time, we still get our first Constitution. Since 1789, France has had 15 different constitutions. Just go through and look at the list. Look at the other nations in the world and imagine what it would be like to live in a nation that has 10, 15, 20, 25 constitutions. As a matter of fact, I just got back from Poland. We took a congressional delegation, U.S. Congressman to Poland. I talked to people in Poland that in their lifetime, they have lived through 7 constitutions in Poland. Do you know what the average length of a constitution in the history of the world is? The average length of the Constitution in the history of the world is 17 years. Now we're looking at 231 years that we've had ours. It did not cross the mind of anyone who came in here that we're going to have a revolution. By the way, not only do the nations average a constitution every 17 years, they average a violent revolution every generation or so. Nobody came in here today worried about rebel forces coming and spraying us with machine gun bullets that we die out of it. We don't think like that. The rest of the world does. In addition to what we have with stability, we also have something unique with creativity. You see, America is 4% of the world's population, but when you measure our population, you measure creativity by patents, by copyrights, by other things. Every single year, America produces more technology, more medical cures, more discoveries, more scientific inventions, more everything, more symphonies, more plays, more everything than the other 96% of the world combined. Now, 4% of the world's population should produce 4% of the world's whatever. Our 4% produces more than the other 96%. I was recently in Germany, was over there at American military bases. I stayed at a 5-star hotel in Germany, which is pretty cool. I'm a cowboy, I'm not used to staying in places like that. It would have been really nice if they had internet at that 5-star hotel. We've even got internet at Motel 6 here. We take so much for granted that the rest of the world does not get. So we're unique with our stability, we're unique with our creativity, we're unique with our prosperity. Our 4% of the world's population every year produces nearly 25% of the world's gross domestic product, and America does not produce more because America has more. That's just not the case. We don't have greater natural resources. Again, I'm a cowboy, which puts me in the ranching community in Texas. The ranching and farming community is 1% of America's GDP, not the world's, 1% of America's GDP, and every single year, ranching and farming in America produces enough food to feed the entire world, and America is only 66th in the world in percentage of farmable land. There are 65 nations that have a greater percentage of farmable land than we do, but we've been able to take what we have and make it go further than any other nation. So we are unique. When you throw all of this together, this is what's come to be known as American exceptionalism. We are different from other nations. People don't like that term, especially academics don't like that term. Doesn't change the fact that when you look statistically, we are unique, we are exceptional, we are the exception, not the rule. It's not a statement of arrogance, it's just a statement that that's the way it is. We're more stable, more prosperous, we're more creative, more everything than other nations. Now, when you look at that and you look at what we have related to that, it's interesting that other generations have recognized this. Calvin Coolidge is one of the greatest constitutional presidents America's ever had. Calvin Coolidge said this. He said, the more I study the Constitution, the more I realize that no other document devised by the hand of man has brought so much progress and happiness to humanity. He said, to live under the American Constitution is the greatest political privilege that was ever accorded to the human race. We're so used to it, we just kind of take it for granted. We don't see it as something really, really special because we have it every single day when we get up, every night when we go to bed. Nothing's really changed. We can have elections still, the nation goes on. So we're used to it, but it's not always been that way. And when you look at that document, American Exceptionalism, what is it that makes us different from every other nation in the world? Well, what philosophy produced this? And our founding fathers, fortunately, are prolific writers. And you just heard, we have one of the largest collections of founding documents in America. We have 120,000 documents from before 1812. So I have thousands of handwritten documents of George Washington, Adams, and Jefferson, Madison, etc. Got all sorts of stuff from all aspects of American history. And what made us exceptional, these guys were prolific writers. They wrote it all down. So if you go to the first government document they did, which is the Declaration of Independence, in that document, they set forth 126 words at the very beginning that gave 5 principles on how all American government operates. Those 5 principles, everything in the Constitution goes to those 5 principles. Let me quickly take you to those 5 principles. This is not a Constitution part. You have to understand this to understand the Constitution. The first thing they talk about in the Declaration is 126 words. They talk about the laws of nature, nature's God. That is a quote out of the most famous law book of the day. And what it said was there is an absolute standard for moral rights and wrongs. It's the laws of nature, nature's God. There is a moral standard. You can know what is right and wrong. By the way, in America today, 2 out of 3 Americans believe that there is nothing absolutely right or absolutely wrong. 4 out of 5 millennials believe that. Now that's hard to have a nation that works when 2 out of 3 people can't agree on what's right and what's wrong, when they get to make up their own rights and wrongs. In the Declaration, we said, no, there are standards. There's a standard for knowing right and wrong. And by the way, once you know what's right and wrong, then you know what's true and what's not true. So the standard of truth is first preceded by a moral standard. That's the first thing they said in the Declaration. There is a moral standard that God gives by which we can know right from wrong. Second thing they said, and all men are created equal, they're endowed by their Creator. That tells us that there is a God. They did not take an ambivalent position that says, you know, as government, we're not going to take a position for or against God. I know we got atheists living in America, and so we can't. No, they had atheists living in America. They had people who didn't like God in America, and they still said, as a nation, we stand for the premise that there is a God, because you can't have limited government if you don't. If you don't know that there's a God, then you'll let the government become God. And at that point, when government becomes God, they do everything. And so we limited government by saying, hey, there's something higher than government. That's God. And that's why the third thing we said in the Declaration is they're endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights. Not only is there a God, He has given a certain set of rights that come from Him, and because they come from Him, nobody else can touch it. If I can explain it this way, the ranch that we have in Texas, I've got a nice red pickup. I like my red pickup. I've had several generations of red pickups. My son is also on the ranch, and he's got a black pickup, and I didn't care for that, so I painted his black pickup red, because everybody needs a red pickup. Actually, I can't do that. That black pickup is his private property. Now, I can paint anything red that I own. I can paint my cattle red. I can paint my pastures red. I can paint my roads red. I can't paint his pickup red because I don't own it. What this did is said, government, there are a certain set of rights you can't paint red because they don't belong to you. They came from God, and because they do, you cannot touch them. So that's another way of limiting government. We said there are certain things government cannot touch. That's why in the Constitution we gave enumerated powers. We only allow the federal government to do 15 specific things that we laid out in the Constitution. They can't spray paint anything else red. That's the original philosophy. Now, the more secular we become, the less we understand this, the more we let government do. The fourth thing they said in the Declaration, the third principle is inalienable rights come from God. The fourth is that to secure these rights, which rights? Inalienable rights. That to secure inalienable rights, governments are instituted among men. That tells us the purpose of government. The first purpose of government is not to secure the borders. It's not to make sure we have jobs. It's not to make sure the economy is good. The first purpose of government is to make sure you have the right to practice your inalienable rights given to you by God. The right to defend yourself, the right to worship God according to dictates of conscience, the right to justice, all those rights. The right to what?
Right to life.
Right to life. Absolutely. That's the first of the inalienable rights. And by the way, I won't take the time right now, but I will tell you, having spent a lot of time in the political world, I was elected, held a political office in Texas for 9 years. I have dealt with thousands of elected officials, trained thousands of elected officials. I'll tell you right now, the best way for me to tell you what their overall philosophy is to find out where they are in life. If you tell me where they are in life, you got somebody running for U.S. Senate, great. Tell me where they are in life. I will tell you how they will vote on the capital gains tax. I will tell you how they will vote on the Human Convention of the Rights of the Child. I'll tell you how they vote on small arms treaty. I'll tell you all of that because if you get off on a line, you're off on the whole philosophy. The Founding Fathers dealt explicitly with the issue of abortion. And when they said first is a right to life, the liberty of the property, life, in their writings, they specifically said abortion. I have a book from abortion done back in 1806 dealing with abortion in America. Abortion is not a new thing in America. Abortion was back in the Old Testament. Back in the Old Testament where in Leviticus and Deuteronomy we were told you cannot take the life of an unborn child. fifth and final thing they said in the Declaration was, governments are instituted by men deriving their just powers from the consent of the government. So, consent of the government, we get to vote on things and the majority wins, which, by the way, is why the Founding Fathers did not allow a filibuster in the Senate. Filibuster in the Senate means that 59 votes will lose to 41 votes every day of the week. Not supposed to be that way. 59 is supposed to win. 51 is supposed to win. It doesn't. 51 does not win anything in the Senate anymore. You have to have 60 votes to win. It was never designed. It was not a constitutional principle. But that's the 5 principles. And if you look at those 5 principles, one is there is a fixed moral truth, fixed moral right wrong that establishes truth. There is a divine creator who gives inalienable rights. Government exists to protect those rights. And then below that, you get to choose your own majority. Well, by the way, notice that the majority choosing is the 5th thing, not the 1st thing. In other words, you cannot vote on inalienable rights. We can't have a vote that says, you know, we voted on whether you have a right to defend yourself, or whether you have a right to life, and we voted by margin of 85 to 15 that you can't defend yourself. It doesn't matter how your vote goes. I have an inalienable right to defend myself. You can't vote on an inalienable right. And we decided rape is no longer a crime. By a margin of 92 to 8, it doesn't matter what you decided, rape violates the laws of nature and nature's God. So you can't vote on moral rights and wrongs. You can't vote on an inalienable right. What do you vote on? You can vote on whether the sidewalks are 4 feet wide, 5 feet wide, or 6 feet wide. You can vote on whether the speed limit is 45 or 55, or in Texas 85 is our speed limit. You can vote on all sorts of things. You can't vote on moral rights and wrongs and inalienable rights. So those are the 5 principles they set forth. And by the way, notice that 4 of those 5 are God-centered. You see, you cannot have a limited government be a secular government. You cannot name any secular government in the world right now that is a limited government. You surely can't name France or Germany. France, you're not allowed the freedom of religion. If you share the gospel on the sidewalk in France, you will go to jail. It violates their proselytization law. If you homeschool your family in Germany, you will go to jail because the kids belong to the state, not to the parents. I don't care whether you choose Turkey or Italy. You choose any secular nation, it is not a limited government. The government thinks it is God and it controls every aspect of life. So that's why you can't have a secular government. That's why 4 of the 5 points the founders put in were all God-centered. And Jefferson, who is certainly one of the least religious of our 250 founding fathers, and by the way, Jefferson and the memorial we have for him in Washington, D.C., there are 4 tablets of stone with great quotes, and then one ring around the top with another one of his great quotes in there. And if you read his quotes, one of them comes from a book that he did in 1781. It is the first book that Jefferson wrote, Notes in the State of Virginia. And this is what Jefferson said. He said, "Can the liberties of the nation be thought secure when we have removed their only firm basis?" Now, newsflash. What does Thomas Jefferson, our least religious founding father, what does Jefferson think is the only firm basis of national liberties? He said it is a conviction. Notice the word conviction. He says it is a conviction in the minds of the people that these liberties are of the gift of God, that they're not to be violated but with His wrath. He said, "Indeed, I tremble for my country when I reflect that God is just, and His justice won't sleep forever." Now this is Jefferson saying, listen up guys, if you don't have a conviction that your liberties come from God, you're going to start screwing around with Him, and you're going to tick Him off, and when He gets mad, we're all going to be in trouble. That's your least religious founding father warning America about this? See, that was the belief they had. So the notion that we have today of compartmentalizing our faith, that, you know, this is secular and this is spiritual, that was never in their thinking, not even the least religious of the founders. So when you look at it, and by the way, if you're interested, we have a book called The Jefferson Lies, which goes, because everybody thinks Jefferson's hostile today, he's anti-religious. We know nothing about Jefferson today. Academics have picked out 4 or 5 little things I like about him. They're going completely out of context, not even true. So this is a good way to get reintroduced to even what the least religious founding fathers said. He makes most Christians today look like secularists compared to him. And I'm not saying he's a Christian. I don't think he was. But he was pro-Christian and pro-Bible and quoted the Bible more than most pastors I know, quite frankly. So when you go back to the Declaration, that is the philosophy that produced the American exceptionalism that we enjoy today. Now, we are talking about the Constitution, not the Declaration, so why this time on the Declaration? Well, the answer is pretty simple. It's the Declaration and the Constitution actually cannot be separated from each other. It's interesting that when you look at movements in history where they wanted to do the wrong thing, they always wanted to get rid of the Declaration. For example, in the 1830s, 40s, and 50s, when slavery and abolition were fighting each other, the Congress, the pro-slavery guys in Congress said the Declaration of Independence has nothing to do with government. Now, it guarantees you a right to liberty, but there's nothing in the Constitution about liberty, so that you just ignore the Declaration. That was the justification for slavery, is it's in the Declaration prohibits it, but we don't do the Declaration. Then when we did Roe v. Wade in 73, we said, wait a minute, you can't do abortions because the Declaration guarantees us a right to life. That was the argument. And they said, no, that's the Declaration. We take an oath to uphold the Constitution, not the Declaration. Declaration has nothing to do with American government. And then more recently, 4 years ago, we said, whoa, natural marriage, that's part of the laws of nature, nature's God. You can't get rid of marriage. That's in the Declaration, the laws of nature. And they said, well, we don't do the Declaration. You see, every time they want to have a huge shift in the nation, they get the Constitution to justify their new position, but they only do it by rejecting the values that came from the Declaration. And I find it intriguing that every one of these national news has stood up openly against the Declaration. But that's not our founding document. We don't take an oath to uphold that. So what's the answer to that? How do we answer that? Well, Sam Adams gave a good answer, because Sam Adams, certainly the father of the American Revolution, he had it all back there. Look what Sam Adams said. Sam Adams said, before the formation of the Constitution, the Declaration was received and ratified by all the states of the Union and has never been disannulled. The Constitution did not set aside the Declaration. Both of those documents still exist side by side. The Declaration sets forth all the principles, and the Constitution takes those principles and shows you how to operate within the framework of those principles. It was a 1-2 punch. It was not the one replace the other. Same thing with John Quincy Adams. John Quincy Adams, great legal scholar, president, he said, the Declaration of Independence was the platform on which the Constitution of the United States has been erected. He said the principles proclaimed in the Declaration of Independence were embodied in the Constitution of the United States. That's why I said all 5 of those principles from the Declaration, you will find them totally embodied all throughout the Constitution. The Constitution will not work apart from the Declaration. Great example of that, the way you cannot separate the two. Let me give you an example. I'm going to go back to the old Supreme Court, and the old Supreme Court in 1892 said, if you want to know the intent of something, they said you need to determine the evil which was intended to be remedied. In other words, take the First Amendment. When they passed the First Amendment, there was some evil they were trying to stop. There was something going on they didn't like. And if you can figure out what they were trying to stop, then you'll know why they passed the First Amendment. Was same with the Second Amendment, same with the Third Amendment, same with any law passed by Congress. When the laws passed, they're trying to stop something going on they don't like. So if you can figure out what they were trying to stop, then you can see exactly why they did what they did, and that gives you the original intent of that law. Now, if you don't use the original intent, you can twist it off and all sorts of things. Here's a great example. That Supreme Court actually said, let us give you some examples. They said, we have a federal law that says, and there's a case called, it's called Kirby versus the United States. And in this case, they said, we have a law that says you cannot impede a mail carrier. The mail must go through. Whatever the weather is, the mail's got to get delivered. You can't, it's a federal law to impede a mail carrier. Well, a guy did impede a mail carrier. The U.S. prosecutor took him to court, had him arrested, and took it all the way to the U.S. Supreme Court to get this guy nailed because he stopped a mail carrier. You know what the rest of the story was? The guy who stopped the mail carrier was a sheriff. The mail carrier had been charged with murder. The sheriff went to arrest the mail carrier for murder, and the prosecutor said, oh, you stopped the progress of the mail. We got to take you to court. That was never the intent of that law. That law was never to protect a postal employee that was a murderer. Well, that's what the court said. Go back and see what it was intended to do, and then that's how you apply it. That's why you have to have the Declaration. I'll give you an example. If you take this clause of the Constitution, Article 1, Section 5, Paragraph 3, this is what the Constitution said. Neither house, during the session of Congress, shall, without the consent of the other, adjourn for more than 3 days, nor than to any other place than that in which the 2 houses shall be sitting. Huh? You want to explain that to me? You can't. Unless you know grievance number 4 in the Declaration. You see, there are 27 grievances in the Declaration telling you what Great Britain had done wrong. And they said, here's what we can't put up with. And so when they got to the Constitution, they said, and here's how we're going to solve it. So those 27 grievances, you have 155 words to start the Declaration, followed by 27 grievances showing how the rights have been violated. If you don't understand the grievance, you don't understand what the Constitution is trying to fix. And it's that way throughout the 2 documents. Grievance after grievance after grievance as a solution to the Constitution. And if you don't know the historical background of that grievance, you'll never figure out what the Constitution, you'll never get the original intent right. And that's why the two documents cannot be separated. As a matter of fact, it's interesting that when you take the Constitution itself, if you go to Article 7 of the Constitution, which is the final article of the Constitution, it closes this way. It says, this Constitution is done in convention by the unanimous consent of the States President the 17th day of September in the year of our Lord 1787. Period. Oh, no, it doesn't have a period there. That's a comma. There's something else past it. And you see, we act today like the Constitution was done in 1787, period. They said the Constitution was done in 1787, which is the 12th year of the independence of the United States. The Constitution actually dated itself to the Declaration of Independence. It didn't replace the Declaration. It says we're going back 12 years. This is our starting point back here in 1776. It's striking that if you take any federal law, and I just took a random federal law from George Washington. Washington signed a bunch of federal laws. Look how every federal law is signed, even to this day. George Washington, given into my hand and the seal of the United States the 14th day of August, 1790, and in the 15th year of the sovereignty and independence of the United States. Every single federal law today dates back to 1776, not to 1787. As a matter of fact, the law that Trump signed last week, federal law Trump signed last week, has the same thing. It's in the year of sovereignty and independence of the United States. Every federal act dates itself to the Declaration. You cannot throw the Declaration out because every federal law dates to the Declaration, not the Constitution. So that's the first thing to know about the Constitution. And by the way, when you look at the Constitution and what it did, even becoming a state of the United States, I know how to go through this. I mean, it doesn't matter whether you're Utah or whether you're Nebraska or whether you're Dakota. Every state went through Enabling Acts. The Enabling Act said you cannot become a state of the United States unless your government operates by the principles of the Declaration and the specifics of the Constitution. Those two documents have never been separated, and you can't become a state of the United States if you don't follow both documents. So there actually is protection for right to life. Well, that's not in the Constitution. It doesn't have to be. Part of our stated requirement is to follow the principles of the Declaration. So that's never been separated. We've had that all the way through. That's why those two documents are inseparable. Now, the U.S. Supreme Court, knowing all this history the way they used to know it, hopefully we're going to get back to knowing history again, because Kavanaugh's a good historian, Gorsuch's a good historian, you got Thomas is a good historian. Hopefully we're going to get back to knowing some of this history again. U.S. Supreme Court said the Constitution is but the body of the letter of which the Declaration is the thought and the spirit. It is always safe to read the letter of the Constitution and the spirit of the Declaration of Independence. So first off, you can't study the Constitution if you haven't mastered the Declaration, because you'll never understand the Constitution if you don't know those 155 words and those 27 grievances. Now, having said that, let's go past that, because today, the portrayal of the Constitution, I've been involved in 7 cases at the U.S. Supreme Court. And the kind of fights we have at the U.S. Supreme Court stem from books like this. This is a book that was done by two professors, Kramnik and Moore at Cornell University. It's called The Godless Constitution. Their argument is the Constitution is a secular document, it's a God-free document. That Constitution actually was designed by secular guys who wanted a secular government. Courts used this book as the basis of, you can't let a kid say God at graduation. We have a godless Constitution. Our professors told us so. This is used in briefs. This is used, all sorts of legal stuff uses this book as the basis. Now, here's the question. If you take the Declaration away, and now the Declaration's got all the God stuff for sure in it, but if you take the Declaration away, is the Constitution itself a godless document? And I'm going to answer no, and I'm going to show you specific clauses that nobody pays attention to, especially these knothead professors who don't have a clue what they're talking about. Let me take you through some of them. The proofs are all in the internal content. For example, one of the clauses I'll point you to in Article 2 is what's called the Sundays Accepted Clause. This is the Sundays Accepted Clause. The Sundays Accepted Clause, Article 1, Section 7, Paragraph 2, says if any bill shall not be returned by the President within 10 days, Sundays accepted, after it shall have been presented to him, the same shall be a law in like manner as to be signed. So, Congress passes law, House does it, Senate does it, they give it to the President. He's got 10 days to sign that law for it to become law. If he doesn't sign it to become law, and the 10 days don't count Sundays. So it might be 12 days, it might be 11 days, but he gets, why is it we don't count Sundays in the Constitution? Real simple. It's a Sabbath. As a matter of fact, if you go back to early courts, they talked about this. They said very simply, you have Christianity as part and parcel of the common law of the land with liberty of conscience to all. And it's always been so recognized. The U.S. Constitution allows it as part of the common law. The President is allowed 10 days to sign a bill with the exception of Sunday. They said the world's various Sabbaths include the Friday of the Mohammedan, the Saturday of the Israelite, the Sunday of the Christian. There is no other religion in the world that has a Sunday Sabbath except Christianity. Not every Christian has a Sunday Sabbath. You got Sabbatarians, you got Seventh Days, you got others, but only Christianity has a Sunday Sabbath, and that's what the Constitution recognizes. Hey, on Sunday we don't do any work. That's a Sabbath day. We don't count federal days. So, and by the way, it is interesting that Pelosi actually passed Obamacare on a Sunday. She brought Congress into session on a Sunday to pass Obamacare, which on its face, that's the day you don't do any congressional work. But we'll get to that debate later. But nonetheless, the court says the observance of Sunday is one of the usages of the common law recognized by our U.S. and state governments. Christianity is part and parcel of the common law. Common law is Article 7 of the Constitution, is the 7th Amendment of the Constitution, by the way. So the common law incorporates that. Plus, we specifically say Christian Sabbath. You don't do any government work on the Christian Sabbath. That's why mail is not delivered on Sunday, because Sunday is the Christian Sabbath, and in a Christian nation, you observe the Sabbath. That's why in 1791, an interesting thing happens. And this is where 1791 we start laying out Washington, D.C. Thomas Jefferson is the Secretary of State. He lays out the Capitol, he lays out the White House, he lays out the Washington Mall. And then they finished building the White House and the Capitol on November the 22nd of 1800. By the way, the Capitol of the United States at that point in time is smaller than this barn is right here. The entire Capitol is smaller than this because, again, federal government's not going to do much. They can only do 15 things. That's all they're allowed to do. There's only 90 members of Congress, House and Senate combined. They're not going to be there that much. That's why the Constitution required Congress to meet at least once a year. And we wish we could get them out of town once a year. They have to meet. See, that's part of the difference. This is the Capitol building in 1800. It's interesting that after November 22nd they moved in. What happened after that on December 4th is recorded in the records of Congress, where that on December 4th it says the Speaker informed the House that the chaplains had proposed, if agreeable to the House, to hold divine service every Sunday in their chamber. What they did starting in 1800 was they turned the Capitol building into a church building, and every Sunday they used the largest room in the Capitol, which is the Hall of the House of Representatives, to have church every Sunday there. Now, the people who approved that were the Speaker of the House, Theodore Sedgwick, and the leader of the Senate, Thomas Jefferson. Jefferson is the one who started church at the U.S. Capitol on Sundays. That's where he went to church for all 8 years he was president, and by the time you got to 1857, the Capitol had been built out. There were 2,000 people a week going to church in the Hall of the House of Representatives. It was the largest church in Washington, D.C. The largest Protestant church in the United States was the one that met in the U.S. Capitol. Are you kidding me? Of course, because it's Sunday's Sabbath. Sunday's a Sabbath. We turned the Capitol building into a church building on Sunday. So that was part of what we had back then. So the Sunday's Sabbath clause is one proof it's not a godless document. Another proof is the 5 oath clauses. The 5 oath clauses in the Constitution require the taking of an oath. One of the guys who framed those clauses is a guy named Rufus King out of New York. He's a signer of the Constitution. He talked about the oath clauses they had framed. He says, excuse me, he said, in the oaths which our laws prescribe, we appeal to the supreme being to deal with us hereafter as we observe the obligation of our oaths. Oaths are a religious activity. They are not a secular activity. He says, the pagan world were and are without the mighty influence of this principle which is proclaimed in the Christian system. 5 clauses where you have to take an oath, and that comes from the, what do you mean it comes from the Christian system? Let's take oaths that happen, like George Washington's oath of office. There's 4 interesting things that happen with the oath. And Rufus King says this comes from the Christian system. Let's see. Well, first off, God told Isaac, I will perform the oath which I swore to Abraham your father. So taking an oath was started by God. God's the one who swore the first oath. Second thing is, God declared, I raised my hand in an oath. I wonder why we raise our hand, because that was the biblical precedent. That's what God did, and He swore to it. Third thing is, the Lord has sworn by His right hand. Why do we raise our right hand instead of our left hand or both hands or no hands? We raise our right hand because that's what the Bible says. That's what God did. And the fourth thing, you shall take oaths in His name. Why do we say so help me God after the oath? Because the Bible says you're to take oaths in His name. So the 5 oath clauses, we do this. This is like Rufus King said, it comes out of the Christian system. So John Witherspoon, also a founding father, great founding father, signed the Declaration. He said, an oath is an appeal to God, the searcher of hearts, for the truth of what we say, and always supposes a calling down of His judgment on us if we lie. God, I've taken an oath, and I know you're the one hearing it, and you know that if I lie, you're going to nail me, and I know that you'll nail me if I lie. See, it was always a covenant between you and God. That's what an oath was. So when you take an oath of office or anything else, you're supposed to realize that this is a religious activity you're doing. You're asking God to come after you if you break your word. He continues, he said, persons entering on public office are obliged to make oath that they will faithfully execute their trust. He said in vows there is no party but God and the person himself that makes the vow. He says, an oath, therefore, implies a belief in God and His providence and is indeed an act of worship. You ever considered an oath to be an act of worship? Founding fathers did, because it was serious stuff. It's between you and God. It's an act of worship. So the oath clauses, there's 5 of those. One of them, George Washington's farewell address, said, don't ever let oaths become secular, the way we have them today. He says, where's the security for property, for reputation, for life, if the sense of religious obligation deserts our oaths? If our oaths ever become secular, what guarantee do you have for property, reputation, life? Because those guys will take oaths, but they won't follow through on it. They'll do all sorts of things when everybody's back is turned, and they'll sell out their property, their life, and they'll screw things up really bad if they don't believe that they're answering God. He said, don't ever let oaths become secular. So that's another proof that the Constitution was not secular, it's not godless, because the oath clauses were totally Bible-centered. By the way, these are documents, they're hard to read from the back. It says, not only do you make oath, and this is 1863, I make oath on the holy evangely of Almighty God. What is that? John. So not only do you take an oath on the Bible, you're taking an oath on the Gospels that tell you the story of Jesus Christ. So in the oath form, it says, hey, I recognize I'm taking an oath on the life and teachings of Jesus Christ. Whoa, it's not just the Bible. We were specifically reminded about Jesus Christ. Here's another oath form. This is standard oath form from the 1860s. In the presence of Almighty God, so help me God. Here's one from 1865. It says, I do solemnly swear or affirm in the presence of Almighty God, so help me. See, our documents, they printed God all over because there was no such thing as a secular oath. We didn't rely on your goodness to keep your word. We relied on His goodness to remind you that if you break your word, you're in trouble with Him. So that was part of what we had in government with the oaths. The next thing I point to is the attestation clause. That's Article 7 of the Constitution. When they close that document off, it says, done a convention in the year of our Lord. Now that's interesting because I looked at other documents of the day, and most of them said done in the year 1787 or 1791 or whatever it was. Some of them said done in the year of the Lord. But the Founding Father says we have done this in the year of our Lord. They personalized it. That's unusual in documents of that day. So that's not a secular invocation. They said, we're recognizing Jesus Christ in this document. We date everything from Him. This is done in the year of our Lord, 1787. So that's unusual. You get past the attestation clause, you go into what would be the source of unique ideas, because our Constitution has lasted 231 years. Nobody else has come close to that. So political science professors said, where in the world did our Founding Fathers get these ideas? And so political scientists at the University of Houston, Louisiana State University said, you know, we think if we can collect the founding writings, read the writings, and see who the Founding Fathers quoted, we'll know where they got their ideas, which is a brilliant idea. And if I followed you around with a tape recorder all day and found out who you quoted, I would know who's important to you. Well, they did that by reading 15,000 writings of the Founding Fathers, and they recorded their results in this book, The Origins of American Constitutionalism. In those 15,000 writings, they found 3,154 quotes where the Founding Fathers quoted, founding writings quoted some source. And they said, okay, now we're going to track every one of these quotes back to its original source. It took them 10 years, but they documented every one of those sources. And going back, they found that the single most quoted individual in all the founding era was Baron Charles Montesquieu, His Spirit of the Laws, a book that was done in 1750. The second most quoted source was Blackstone's Commentaries on Law, 7.9%. That's the book where we get the phrase, the laws of nature, nature's God, and the Declaration. The third most quoted source was John Locke. John Locke did the 2 treatises of government. That's where we got the Declaration of Independence. The ideas for the Declaration came out in his book. But now these are the 3 most cited individuals. But the number 1 most cited source was the Bible. 34% of their quotes came out of the Bible. Now that's a whole lot more than any individual. And these are all really smart individuals, but the Bible is the number 1 source of the ideas for that unique document we have. So how can it be godless if you're using those ideas out there? So that's one source of unique ideas. Let me give you some examples of specific language. For example, if you look at what the Bible says and what the Constitution says, let's take something like capital punishment. Capital punishment, the Bible says this is out of Deuteronomy 17:6, whoever is deserving of death shall be put to death on the testimony of 2 or 3 witnesses. He shall not be put to death on the testimony of 1 witness. You got to have at least 2 eyewitnesses to put somebody to death. You can't do that unless you can't do circumstantial evidence. You got to have 2 eyewitnesses. That's Bible standard, because 1 person can lie, 1 person can perjure themselves. It's hard to get 2 people to lie and perjure themselves. You got to have 2 eyewitnesses. Interestingly, the Constitution talks about the death penalty in 2 locations. The biggest one is when it talks about treason. No person shall be convicted of treason. Treason was a capital offense back then. If you're convicted of treason, you are executed. No person shall be convicted, no person shall be put to death unless on the testimony of 2 witnesses of the same overt act. Now, why would the Constitution attach the death penalty to 2 eyewitnesses? Because that's what the Bible did. The Bible said you can't put anybody to death unless there's 2 eyewitnesses. Oh, really? So we took that idea. You find me another constitution in the world that uses that standard, 2 eyewitnesses. It's in the Bible and it's in the U.S. Constitution. Find me somewhere else it goes. See, they took those ideas and put them right in the document. Same thing when you get to presidential requirements. You see, Israel had 12 tribes, and they had governors over their tribes, and they had a council of 17 each tribe. So they had what we would call a senate and governor. And you could be from any nation and be the senator and governor. You could not be the national leader and be from any nation. This is what the Bible said in Deuteronomy 17:15. One from among your brethren you shall set over you as king. You may not set a foreigner over you who is not your brother. You can have a foreigner be your governor. You can have an immigrant be your senator, your congressman. You can't have an immigrant be your president, which is interesting because in the Constitution it says no person except a natural-born citizen shall be eligible to the office of president. Now, where do you get that idea? That you have to be a natural-born citizen, because that's what the Bible required from the national leader back in the Bible. You also have requirements like attainder. If you don't know what attainder is, let me give you the Bible verse and you'll understand. The Bible says, the soul who sins shall die. The Son shall not bear the guilt of the Father, nor the Father bear the guilt of the Son. The righteousness of the righteous shall be upon himself, and the wickedness of the wicked shall be put upon himself. In other words, you can't punish the parents for what the kids do. You can't punish the extended family for what somebody crazy in your family did. You punish that person who did that. And that's not what Europe did. Europe said, oh, you committed treason, your entire family line for the rest of your eternity can never own property, great root, you can never hold off. See, what they do is they taint the whole blood. It's called a taint. It's a taint. They taint the bloodline of the family. The Constitution says, no attainder of treason shall work corruption of blood or forfeit. You can't blame the whole family. You can't make the whole family give up something when somebody's done something like treason. All you can do is punish the individual that did it. You can't do what Europe does. You can't have attainders. You can't have corruption of blood. Also, we have the same thing, Article 1. No bill of attainder shall be passed. We don't allow legislation that punishes a group. You have to punish the individual that does something wrong. That's a biblical concept. You have so many other ideas, separation of powers. Founding fathers such as John Adams and Alexander Hamilton and George Washington all said that separation of powers, by the way, is a unique idea. You can't find another government doing checks and balances until we did it in America. Nobody did it like we did, and that's one of the things that's made us last the longest. And they all said that it came out of Jeremiah 17:9, said the heart is deceitful above all things and desperately wicked, who can know it? Let me just quote you what John Adams said. This is he's explaining this. He says, the Word of God informs us that the heart is deceitful above all things and desperately wicked, Jeremiah 17:9. He actually has 3 separate writings on Jeremiah 17:9 and separation of powers. He goes on to say, he said, there is no man so blind as not to see that the founded government, upon the supposition that bodies of men left to themselves to practice a course of self-denial, is either to babble like a newborn infant or to deceive like an unprincipled impostor. If you think people are inherently good, you're nuts. People are not inherently good. Look at history, look at government, they will always eventually do the wrong thing. So you better figure out how to have your government where that it cannot be taken down by an individual. Here's what we'll do. We'll separate either branches so that if the president screws up, the other 2 branches maybe can stop it. If the courts screw up, the other branches can stop. See, they put now we don't follow checks and balances, we don't even know what they are. But they put it in back then specifically because they believe Jeremiah 17:9, that's a Christian doctrine called the depravity of man. Man is good if God gets a hold of his heart and he does the right thing. But left to himself, man is just that story of, I mean, that's why we had the flood, because man wasn't good and left himself and did everything wrong. So that's why we had separation of powers, and there are so many other passages I can give you. I mean, I just go through and show you the Bible verses. The language is in the Bible, and the language is in the Constitution. Now today, so few people know the Bible, they don't recognize Bible language when it's in the Constitution. We have to have a Bible verse after today to know where it is. I mean, we got to tell you, this is John 3:16. This is Isaiah 4:12. Back then, we just quoted the language because everybody knew the Bible, but we can't do that anymore. Now we think it's a godless constitution. So it's unique language. A couple other things I'll point to, then I'll close it down. The nature of the delegates. See, these are the 50, there were 55 guys who wrote the Constitution, 39 of them signed it. 16 of them did not sign it. Those 16, many of them went home and created the Bill of Rights. Said, we like the Constitution, but we want more limits on the federal government, so let's do a Bill of Rights to tell the government what it can't touch. So you have 55 delegates, 39 that signed it. Try naming 7 of those guys. Most people get 2, sometimes 3. But if I start going through and showing you, just example, that guy right there. Who's ever heard of him? Abraham Baldwin was the youngest theologian in America. He actually was a professor at Divinity Yale University. He started the University of Georgia as a school to train ministers, 1785. Now, the University of Georgia has no clue that's why they were started today. The University of Georgia was started by that side of the Constitution. Oh, we got theologians sitting in the Constitution? Yeah, we got a bunch of theologians sitting in the Constitution, a bunch of preachers sitting there as well. You have other folks like this man. This is Rufus King. We've already talked about him. And you see, Rufus King was also a founder of the American Bible Society. And in the state of New York, he also founded what was called the Common Prayer Book Society. So not only does he help distributed Bibles, he's helped distributed prayer books all over the state. Sounds like he's not a very godless guy. No, he's not a very godless guy. You take folks like Charles Cushworth Pinckney. He's from South Carolina. He was the Major General in the American Revolution. He, too, was the founder of the American Bible Society, the National Bible Society. They still distribute $250 million a year. You got folks like James McHenry. James McHenry was the Secretary of War for George Washington. James McHenry is the founder of the Baltimore Bible Society, which let that go. Then you also have folks like Roger Sherman. He's the only founding father who signed all 4 founding documents. He is a theologian. He wrote the Doctrinal Creed for his denomination in Connecticut. You also have folks like William Livingston. When he was 14 years old, he was living as a missionary among the Mohawk Indians, considered the most ferocious tribe in America at that time. A missionary, 14 years old. Then you got folks like Gouverneur Morris. He's the most active member of the Constitutional Convention. Spoke 173 times in the convention. He's called the penman of the Constitution. And this guy said, hey, your nation will not survive if you do not have religion in schools. You got to be teaching Bible and prayer in school. That's the penman of the Constitution. I thought they wanted a secular government. Then you have folks like Alexander Hamilton in April 1804. He comes up with the idea of having a Christian Constitutional Society. Let's start clubs all over America, and their 2 objectives will be to elect to office folks who are Christians who support the Constitution. That's why it's called the Christian Constitutional Society. Alexander Hamilton starts a grassroots movement of clubs to elect people who support Christianity and the Constitution. You have folks like John Langdon. He was the governor of New Hampshire. John Langdon was also a founder of the American Bible Society. In addition to that, you have Gunny Bedford. He was an aide-de-camp to George Washington, served throughout the Revolution. He closed his public orations with this statement: now to the triune God, the Father, the Son, the Holy Ghost, ascribe all honor, dominion forevermore, etc. But how many people even recognize most of the names I just gave you? See, what we'll do is we'll take a Ben Franklin or somebody else, and we'll say, oh, all the founders are pretty good religious. I can go to the 39. I can go to the 55. And you're going to have a hard time finding anybody that's near religious. Now, Franklin's at least religious, but he wasn't secular, not by a long shot. I mean, when he became the governor of Pennsylvania, he came up with a plan to raise church-wide attendance statewide. Now, that's your least religious founding father coming up with a statewide plan to work to raise church attendance. So none of these guys were secular. The other thing I'll point to, then we'll start wrapping this down, is the testimony of the delegates. It said when they got the convention finished, when they got the Constitution done, they quoted something that was frequent in the Bible. If you go back to the story of Israel coming out of Egypt, there is something significant there because they've been in slavery 400 years in Egypt, and then they cry out, and God says, okay, I'm going to deliver you. So he sends a deliverer to deliver them, and that's where you get into the 10 plagues. And in those 10 plagues, you have the plague of blood, of frogs, and lice, and flies. And it's interesting that the magicians of the Egyptians could duplicate blood. They could turn water into blood. They said, that's not God. We could do that. When they got the frogs, we call them frogs. No big deal. When they got to the third one, lice, they said, uh-oh, we can't do that. We can't turn the dust into lice. This is serious stuff. And so they told Pharaoh. This is what they told Pharaoh. When all the finger of God. Now notice that phrase. This is the finger of God. That phrase appears throughout the Bible multiple times. For example, if you go to the Ten Commandments, Moses received the Ten Commandments. The Bible says this about the Ten Commandments. When God had finished speaking with Moses on Mount Sinai, he gave Moses the 2 tablets of the testimony, tablets of stone, written by the finger of God. There's that phrase again, finger of God. Then if you get to the handwriting on the wall, you got the same thing. There's that finger of God again. And if you get to Jesus healing the sick and raising the dead, they were criticizing him at the time. And what Jesus told them in Luke 11:20, he said, if I cast out demons with the finger of God, surely the kingdom of God has come. Finger of God. This keeps popping up on the Bible. What's it mean? Finger of God, even go back to Michelangelo and the painting. Finger of God always represented the authority and the power of God. It was way past anything we can do. This is a God thing. We can't duplicate this. We can't write on stone. This is a God thing. So, these guys that do the Bible, founding fathers, look at what they said. Alexander Hamilton, when we finished the Constitution, Alexander Hamilton said this. He said, for my own part, I sincerely esteem the Constitution a system which, without the finger of God, could never have been suggested and agreed upon by such a diversity of interests. This Constitution, God did this. So there's no way we can come up with that. It's like, this is a God thing. You also have the same when you go to James Madison. James Madison writing about it, what it's done. James Madison said, the real wonder is the Constitutional Convention overcame so many difficulties, and to overcome them with as much agreement was as unprecedented as it was unexpected. He said, it's impossible for the pious man not to recognize in it a finger of that almighty hand which was so frequently extended to us in the critical stages of the Revolution. We saw God doing miracles all throughout the Revolution. I would love to tell you some of the stories, what happened in the Battle of Long Island, what happened in so many battles where God changed the weather. No human can change the weather. Changed the weather, but it only affected the British, not affect the Americans. Just unbelievable stuff. It's all written down. We know it happened because somebody hadn't talked about it. It's a figure that we saw in the Revolution. Now we've seen it again. We've seen it in the Constitution. God showed up. He wrote this thing. And then you have the same thing from George Washington. He's called Lafayette. Lafayette was back in France. He adopted Lafayette as his young son. Back in France, he said, Lafayette, we've done it. We've got a Constitution. He said, as to my sentiments with respect to the new Constitution, it appears to me little short of a miracle. It demonstrates as visibly the finger of providence as any possible event in the course of human affairs could ever listen. Finger of providence. There it is. Why do they keep talking finger of God, finger of God? Because that's the Bible phrase. That means that God is the one who showed up and did something sovereign here. It's interesting, even Franklin, least religious founding father, you look at what he said. Franklin talked about the results of the convention. He said, I think it might not be understood to infer that our general convention was divinely inspired to reform the federal constitution. In other words, I'm not saying the Constitution is the same thing as the Bible. It's not that kind of divine inspiration. This is not Scripture. This is the Constitution. He said, however, he said, I must own that I have so much faith in the general government of the world by providence that I can hardly conceive a transaction of such momentous importance should be suffered to pass without being influenced, guided, and governed by that omnipotent, omnipresent, and beneficent ruler in whom all inferior spirits live, move, and have their being. Of course, the Scriptures. He said, I'm telling you, this is not the Bible, but I'm telling you, this is the God. There's no way this came to be without being influenced and guided by God. Same thing with Benjamin Rush. He's a very evangelical founding father. He's a ratifier of the Constitution. He's a signer of the Declaration. He's one of the 3 most notable founding fathers, according to John Adams. He was there in Philadelphia. He saw the convention. He said, I do not believe the Constitution offspring divine inspiration. Again, this is not the Bible. He said, however, I'm as perfectly satisfied that this is much the work of divine providence as any of the miracles reported in the Old and New Testament. He said, choose your miracle out of the Bible. Nothing's bigger than what just happened in the Constitution Convention. I don't care what miracle. Somebody raised it, great, this is bigger. Tell me how they saw this as a secular document. It doesn't even make sense. But then again, we don't read their writings. We don't know who they are. We don't know their character, their nature. We don't even know the clauses in the Constitution. And so today, even as Christians, we often think, yeah, it's Christian influence. No, it's not Christian influence. It's Christian driven. It's biblical driven in a lot of ways, including that language I showed you. So, testimony to delegates. All that to say, okay, all that being what it is that God was talking? No. And I don't need the Declaration to prove that. I can use the Declaration to prove that. I can just prove it out of the Constitution itself. Just the language of the Constitution, language of those who wrote the Constitution. Here's the bigger question. Why does it matter? Who cares whether it's a religious document or not? Here's why it matters. Stephen Cole is a legal writer back in the 1830s, 1840s. Stephen Cole did a lot of legal commentaries on the Constitution, etc. This is the way he described what happened with writing the Constitution. He says, it was in the spirit of true Christianity that the hospitality and blessing of the United States were offered to all the world. All were invited. We created a government here with Christian principles that everybody in the world come have freedom. Come on, we want you here. And so we had everybody to be blessed. We wanted everybody to be blessed with good government, quite frankly. I just finished a book. It came out this week. Regular Press put it out. It deals with 6 hot issues that are out there today, one of which is immigration. You'd be surprised to see what the Founding Fathers said about immigration. You'd also be shocked to see what their requirements for immigrants. To be an immigrant to the United States, what minimum standards do you have to meet? Now, they were wide open to immigrants, but you had to meet certain standards. So they invited everybody to come, and you got to meet a standard to be here. Interesting to see what they said. And by the way, interesting to see what the Bible says about that same standard. Oh, I guess maybe the founders got it out of the Bible. Yes, that's why it looks exactly the same. Nonetheless, that's a book, if you're interested, we have on the table back there. He continued. He said, the Christian men of that day intended that the nation should continue to be a Christian nation. He said, they did not place Christianity beneath nor over their political institutions. Rather, it was the atmosphere which they breathed could administer to. He continued. He says, it was the source of their inspiration. They sought to make the blessings available for the instruments of Christian men for the good of the whole human family. We wanted good government for everybody. But notice what he said. Christianity was the atmosphere which was breathed. Now, why is that significant? Think about what happened in '68 when we went to the moon. We get to the moon in 1968. We got a different atmosphere. We live good on Earth. We try to use that atmosphere up there to kill us. We can't live up there because it's a different atmosphere. That's what the Constitution is. If you try to operate the Constitution outside the atmosphere of Christianity, it will kill it. And it's not going to last. It's not going to do what it's supposed to. It's not going to be limited like it's supposed to. The atmosphere in which it was created, you have to breathe that atmosphere. That's part of the original intent, to be able to keep that thing alive. And so the more secular it becomes, the less effective that doctrine was, and the more difficult that we have under it. So the Constitution was created in the atmosphere of Christianity. John Adams said it this way. He said, our Constitution is made only for a moral and a religious people. If you don't have that atmosphere, it's not going to work. He said it's wholly inadequate to the government together. The Constitution will not work outside of a moral and religious atmosphere. So again, it's never designed to be secular. Not at all. So when you look at these professors who did this book, you look at Kramnik and Martin, here's the 2 professors from Cornell. I'll just give you some examples. I'll give you a whole lot more, we just don't have time. What do they base it on? I mean, these are academics. They gotta have a basis somewhere. They do. That's why you always go to the end of the book and you look at the footnotes and know the sources. I want to see your footnotes. I want to see what you do. And here's what the footnotes say. The note sources. If you can read it right here at the bottom, they say, we have dispensed with the usual scholarly apparatus of footnotes. They don't have a stinking footnote, not one. That's how revisionism works. This is what goes on in academia. Hey, we have PhDs. We know what we're talking about. No. And by the way, they say, and we don't need to have footnotes because here's a book from 1991, here's one from 1963, here's one from 1987. They give 15, 20 books. None of them are after or before 1960. Now, why would you look at the 1760s by reading books from the 1960s? Yeah, right. Yeah, come on, give me a break. That's hearsay. No court would accept that. That's hearsay evidence. Well, I had a friend who told me, his friend told him, who told me, you can't do that. You go back to the original sources. They don't, because if you do, you get a totally different outcome than what they're trying to promote. So that concept, let me close with some quotes on the Constitution. I hope that we have a respect for the Constitution, maybe at a deeper level than what we did. And I'll tell you again, if you don't interpret it under original intent, it doesn't make as much sense. But the clauses in there, they're really cool. They're really pointed. You just have to know the background to them. But you have George Washington who said this. He says, the Constitution is the guide which I will never abandon. Oh yeah, that's a good standard to have. We need every elected official to have that, whether you're dog catcher, whether you're President of the United States, but you need to know the document. You see, Monday is Constitution Day, and in 2004, Congress passed a federal law that requires every entity that receives federal funds to set aside Monday, Constitution Day, and teach the Constitution. Every public school is required to do it. Every federal office, every federal agency is required by law to do it. Currently, 90% of schools do not recognize Constitution Day at all. Well, that's a federal law. Well, we're local. We can go talk to the superintendent and say, this is Monday, you got to be doing this. This is a federal law. Matter of fact, if I turn you in, you can lose your federal funds over this. Okay, I'll do it. No, great. Use what we need to, and let's teach the Constitution. He says, the God I'll never abandon. You also have President Abraham Lincoln. He said, don't interfere with anything in the Constitution. That must be maintained, for it's the only safeguard of our liberties. He says, we the people are the rightful masters of both Congress and the courts. We don't think that today, but we used to be. Not to overthrow the Constitution, but to overthrow the men who pervert the Constitution. See, that used to be, we the people had power over the judiciary. It was never an independent branch until the 1960s. We've been told the judiciary is an independent branch. The Federalist Papers specifically say that the courts are not an independent branch. And by the way, if you didn't know, the Constitution also said federal judges do not have lifetime appointments. So if you've been told they have lifetime appointments, read Article 3 of the Constitution. They only get to serve for the duration of good behavior. If they don't behave themselves, they get to be thrown off the court. And we used to do that all the time. But we look at the founding fathers, we only look at the judges of the founding fathers threw off the court for what they called bad behavior. One guy cussed in the courtroom. They said, that's bad behavior for a judge. You're gone. Another guy overturned an act of Congress that said, you don't get to tell Congress what it can and can't do. You're gone. They threw him off. You look what the founding fathers threw judges off the court for. We used to know the Constitution. You go to Thomas Jefferson. Thomas Jefferson said something similar. He said, in questions of power, then, let no more be heard of confidence in man, but bind him down from mischief by the chains of the Constitution. You can only bind him down if you know what the Constitution says. You also have Daniel Webster. I love his quote. Daniel Webster said, hold on to the Constitution and to the republic for which it stands. Miracles do not cluster, and what has happened once in 6,000 years may not happen again. Hold on to the Constitution. This document we got, we're the only nation in 6,000 years who's been 231 years with the same piece of paper. Hold on to that. That may never happen again. See, that was what we taught in previous generations. The final quote I'll give you comes from John Jay. He's an author of the Federalist Papers. He's the original Chief Justice of the U.S. Supreme Court. This is a quote. It's worth memorizing. If you would do it, it's worth your time. There are 7 verbs in here I want you to see. I want you to see the sequence of verbs that he gives citizens. This is what he says. Watch the verbs. Every member of the state ought diligently to read. See the first one? You ought to read the Constitution. You ought to read and study the Constitution. There's a difference between reading it and studying it. You can read it in a few minutes. Studying will take a little more time. Dig into it. Read and study the Constitution and teach the rising generation to be free. So read it, study it, then start teaching it to others. The best way for you to learn something is to teach it to someone else. That's why mentoring is so good. By knowing their rights, once you know what your rights are, you will then perceive when they're being violated, and you'll be the better prepared to defend and to assert. Not only can I go on defense, I can go on offense with the Constitution. I can defend my rights, and I can assert my rights. Notice those 7 things that you have there. Real simple layout. He says, read the Constitution, study the Constitution, teach the Constitution, know your rights, perceive your violations, defend constitutional rights, and assert. Great solution. Every single citizen should be able to do that. I will say that one of the things that we've been asked in recent years is we've asked, I guess in the last 3 or 4 years, there's been 4 colleges that have come to us and asked us to start government programs at their colleges. And we have. And it's a lot of fun, because what we do, one of the textbooks we take is from 1828. We have these brand new college courses using the 1828 textbook. It's called An Elementary Catechism of the Constitution by Arthur Stansbury. It is what we gave kids in elementary school about the Constitution. I would lay odds that 95% of federal judges cannot answer what every elementary kid used to be able to answer about the Constitution. That's why we use that book. It's great. You can go online, download it from Google Books. It's free. Arthur Stansbury Catechism of the Constitution. Look at the questions in there and look at what the common knowledge of all citizens used to be. And if we can get those 7 things down, we can turn this thing around. And I'll tell you, we're getting a lot of good people elected. Heather's here today. Heather Scott's one of those good people who understand this. We're getting that coming through the state legislatures. They're working their way into Congress. I have more guys in Congress now I consider constitutional service at any point in my lifetime. They're not the majority yet, but they're a growing body, and things are starting to change for good. If you want more information on this, we've got a table at the back with all sorts of stuff. Thank you guys for